The big news, of course, is that with that signature, Canada caught a break. No tariffs. Likewise, Mexico, at least not for now.
Due to the unique nature of our relationship with Canada and Mexico, we're negotiating right now NAFTA, and we're going to hold off the tariff on those two countries to see whether or not we're able to make the deal on NAFTA.
Indeed, while the threat lingers, it's now effectively in the background, and Canadian officials worried about steel and aluminum exports who'd been pressing the U.S. hard against tariffs can now refocus on those NAFTA talks. Trump, meanwhile, underlining that while he may make other exceptions, for now the tariffs will apply to all other countries.
Today, I'm defending America's national security.
They're aimed mainly at China, which has been dumping cheap steel worldwide. But Trump's penalties have enraged U.S. allies caught in his crosshairs. From steel-making countries in Europe, threats of retaliation have sparked fears of a trade war. And opposition to Trump's action is said to be fierce even within the White House. That's Gary Cohn, Trump's chief economic advisor, who announced this week he's quitting. It's believed because of the tariffs.
He may be a globalist, but I still like him.
The unfair trade practice is...
And it's left Republican lawmakers, longtime backers of free trade, perplexed and dismayed.
I'm just not a fan of broad-based, across-the-board tariffs, because I think you'll have a lot of unintended consequences. You'll have a lot of collateral damage.
Well, I'm not happy with it because these tariffs are actually going to be a tax on the American citizens.
Let's go take a picture in the Oval Office.
Then again, surrounding himself today with U.S. steel and aluminum workers, such tariffs are exactly the kind of thing Trump campaigned on. And then Americans elected him. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
So those exemptions aren't exactly the free pass Canada was hoping for. Set to take effect in 15 days for the rest of the world. They won't apply to Canada and Mexico while those NAFTA talks continue. The challenge now, convincing the White House they should be permanent. As Katie Simpson tells us, it's a tall order.
An upbeat Chrystia Freeland declared today's announcement a step forward for the country.
Our work is not yet done. We're going to keep on working hard until we reach a point where the prospect, where we have a full and permanent exclusion for Canada.
Canada was granted a temporary reprieve after what a source calls the most aggressive week of lobbying by the government in the past year. The Prime Minister and his inner circle reached out to more than a dozen top U.S. officials to make Canada's case for an exemption. This morning, Justin Trudeau hinted the Canadian message was getting through.
But I think there's a level of confidence because of the work we've been doing over the past week.
CBC News has learned the Canadian pitch hinged on national security and highlighted that steel and aluminum from Canada have been vital for U.S. fighter jets and tanks. It also pointed out that cheap Chinese steel is not entering the U.S. market through Canada. The Foreign Affairs Minister is now setting out to convince those same American officials these tariffs cannot be linked to NAFTA talks.
Our approach is clear and unchanged. Canada's view is that these are quite separate negotiations.
The government's outreach efforts will now focus on a domestic audience.
We will look at all possible options going forward to help our industry.
Innovation Minister Navdeep Bains tried to offer reassurances to Canada's aluminum workers in Quebec today, but they are having a difficult time processing the unprecedented uncertainty.
I can tell you they take it really seriously, but they wish that it's a bad dream. It's just a bad dream.
And that is the sentiment that seems to be hanging over much of this process that is nowhere near an end. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Ottawa.
As Katie mentioned there, Canada's been driving home that message that Canadian steel is not a threat to American national security. It hasn't been, and it isn't now. And sources say this was part of the message that appears to have resonated with the Trump administration.
Canada and the U.S. have the closest national security collaboration of any two countries in the world. We have fought and died together in multiple world wars and theaters around the world.
Consider this. The U.S. invasion of Iraq in 2003 meant there was a sudden need to arm thousands of trucks and Humvees. But that required much more armor-grade steel than the U.S. could ever produce.
They deserve the best, and I have told Many families I've met with, we're doing everything we possibly can to protect your loved ones.
So the Pentagon turned to Algoma in Sault Ste. Marie for armored plates to reinforce the doors and underbodies of the Humvees. Those Canadian steel plates arguably saved countless American soldiers' lives from improvised explosive devices.